Okay, in our last podcast on the digestive system in Standard 4.1, we left off at the stomach. So now we are going to be moving into the small intestine. The small intestine actually has several different functions, and it is probably the single most important organ involved with the digestive system, since it is going to do both digestion and absorption. One of the ways the small intestine can do this is it actually is going to receive a lot of secretions from the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, and then all of the food that was turned into liquid in the stomach also is going to empty into the small intestine. And so all of these different chemicals are all going to come together in the small intestine. We're going to completely break down the food, and then we're going to absorb all of it into the body, into the blood, to get it to the cells. So your small intestine is divided into three subdivisions. The first is called the duodenum. The duodenum is where all of these secretions are going to get dumped into the small intestine. So it's the very, very beginning of the small intestine. The only thing that happens there is digestion, and that's basically where all of the different secretions, enzymes, everything get mixed together with the liquefied food. From there we move to the jejunum. In the jejunum you are going to be completely breaking down all of the food, and then you will begin absorbing that food into the blood system, and so that the food molecules can then get out to all the different cells. And then the last part is called the ileum, and the ileum's main job is for absorption only. So by the time the food gets to the ileum, it should be completely broken down, and then it will be absorbed into your bloodstream at this point. So this is what the different regions look like. So the duodenum is actually the shortest region right at the beginning. So connected up here would be the stomach. The liquefied food would come in here, and the food would move in this direction. You'd also be getting the secretions from the liver, would be dumping its stuff in here, the liver and gallbladder. And then the pancreas, which is over here, is also going to be emptying its secretions into the duodenum. So everything kind of gets dumped into the duodenum and mixed together. Then the food is going to move through the jejunum, where it will get completely broken down the rest of the way, and then you'll start absorbing it, and then it all gets absorbed completely in the ileum. And then whatever is left, whatever does not get absorbed, will then move into the large intestine. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit closer with these functions of the small intestine. So in the small intestine, we are going to completely break down our food using enzymes. And the majority of those enzymes are going to come from the pancreas, although the small intestine does make some of its own. The majority do come from the pancreas. So we're going to take all of those food molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids that we've taken in, and we're going to break them down into their smallest monomers. Okay, so whatever their monomers are, we're going to break down this food into those smallest little itty-bitty pieces. Once they are broken down into their smallest little monomers, then they will be absorbed into the blood and transported around to all of the different cells. Okay, so you got to break it down completely, get it down to the smallest component that we can, and then transport it to the cells, and the cells will take that broken down food and use it for what it needs to be used for. Okay. Now the small intestine is quite long. It can be up 6 to 7 meters long, and it's also highly folded. Lots and lots of folds inside. There's also a bunch of little projections in there called villi, and these are all going to be involved with increasing the surface area for the absorption to occur. So food takes, many hours. A typical meal takes about 24 hours to completely digest. It spends a lot of that time in your small intestine because you need to take a lot of time to break it down, and then it takes even more time to absorb it. And so you have all of these little places inside of your small intestine where this absorption can happen. So it's not just a smooth tube like the inside of a hose. It's actually highly folded, and then there's lots of little things sticking out. So this is what that looks like. So this would be the small intestine. The inside, you can see there's folds. And here's a close-up of a couple of those folds. And then sticking off of those folds, you have these little things called villi. And even sticking off of those villi, you can have even smaller ones called microvilli. But all inside of those, you've got blood vessels. And so the food will get absorbed directly into the blood from the intestine inside here. Okay. Now, once all of the absorption has happened, you've gotten all the nutrients out, whatever is left is going to move to the large intestine. Now, what is happening here is that food that is left is actually still very, very liquidy, watery. So we need to take all of that water out and return it back to the blood. So one of the ways that we get water back into our blood is through absorption through the large intestine. If you ever have a parasite or a bacteria or something going on in your large intestine and the food moves too quickly, that's where you can get diarrhea because the water is not moving out fast enough. Okay, so once the water is removed, whatever is left of the undigested food gets compacted into feces, and it will be stored there until you can get rid of it. This is also where a lot of vitamins get made by bacteria in our gut. We talked about methanogens, which are the ones that are going to help us break down fiber, and they end up producing gas in the process, but they also are helping to produce vitamins, and those vitamins will actually get absorbed into our bloodstream through the large intestine along with the water. Okay, so the fecal matter will get stored prior to defecation, so basically this is where you're going to store all of your solid waste until you are able to get rid of it from your body. Okay, so your large intestine is called the large intestine because it's larger in diameter than the small intestine, but it's much shorter. It's maybe about 3 feet long. And all of the liquefied food will come in here through this valve, and then it's going to move up the ascending colon, across the transverse, down the descending colon, and again, this is going to take several hours for that food to move all the way through. And then it will get stored in the colon here, and then in the rectum is a muscle, and so when enough has been stored at this point here, the rectum will get triggered that it needs to release. Okay, so the last portion of the digestive tract is the rectum, and it terminates at the anal canal. So the canal is actually a really strong muscle that you can relax yourself when it is an appropriate time to do so. Okay, and then you can release your solid waste, which we call feces. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the accessory organs that are involved with digestion. So your liver is a very large organ that covers a good amount of your abdomen. Underneath that is a smaller non-essential organ but important one called the gallbladder. And then a incredibly essential organ is the pancreas. And all of these organs you can see lead directly into the duodenum, which is then connected to the rest of the small intestine. So all of their secretions that they're going to make are going to dump into the small intestine, and then will completely break down all of the food. Okay, so let's start with the pancreas. The pancreas has a couple of different roles in the body in different systems, but its digestive functions is to make something called pancreatic juice. That juice gets put into the small intestine, and inside of that juice there's two important things. One is sodium bicarbonate, and that is going to neutralize the stomach acid. So remember, inside your stomach you have a pH of about 2. Okay? And most enzymes in most parts of your body cannot tolerate a pH of 2. So the sodium bicarbonate is actually going to neutralize it and bring that pH back up to 7. Okay? Also, the pancreatic juice contains lots and lots of different kinds of enzymes that are going to be used in breaking down all the different foods that you take in. So there's carbohydrates, which are going to obviously break down carbohydrates. You have lipases, which will break down lipids. And then there's proteolytic enzymes. Proteolytic enzymes are going to break down proteins, and there's a couple of different kinds of those. There's a bunch of different kinds of carbohydrates, lipases, and these different ones that break down proteins. And your pancreas is going to make most of them, send them into the small intestine, and that's where they'll mix with food. So remember, food never passes through the pancreas, the liver, or the gallbladder. They're not part of the alimentary canal. Okay, so this is just a look at some of the key digestive enzymes that are made and where they are made. So the mouth makes salivary amylase, and its job is to break down carbohydrates. Okay, so it's going to take starches and break them down into disaccharides, like simple sugars. Your stomach has an enzyme in it called pepsin, and pepsin is involved with breaking down proteins. Okay, now these things, amylase, trypsin, lipase, these are examples of things that come from the pancreas. So the pancreas is going to actually make these ones. So amylase is going to continue breaking down the carbohydrates. Trypsin is involved with breaking down the proteins. and lipase is breaking down the various fats. Now, the small intestine does have the ability to make some of its own enzymes. Maltase, sucrase, and lactase are all going to be breaking down disaccharides into monosaccharides. Okay, so there again is carbohydrate, breaking down carbohydrates. And then the peptidase are going to take our dipeptides, 2 little amino acids together, and break them down into individual amino acids. So they're working on breaking down proteins. So these are just some of the various enzymes that are part of the digestive system. There's actually a lot more. But these are some of the more essential ones, and you can see which organic molecules they're involved with breaking down. Okay. Now from here, we also are going to talk about the liver. The liver's job in digestion is to produce a substance called bile. That bile is then sent to the gallbladder and the small intestine. Okay, bile is a fluid that is going to break apart fats that are found in fatty foods. And this is actually a form of mechanical digestion, not chemical. The reason for that is bile actually works like a detergent. So if you ever take a detergent and mix it with oil, it actually breaks the oil up into smaller pieces. And that is what bile is going to do for our fats. So when we break the fats down into smaller pieces, the enzymes are then able to digest it better. Okay, so if you have one big fat glob like this, and the enzymes have to try to break it down, they have to try to get at it from all these different places. What the bile will do is they'll take that one big fat glob and break it down into smaller fat globs. And now the enzymes can come over and they can attack each of these different little individual globs. Okay. Now the gallbladder is a hollow pear-shaped organ, and its job is to store and concentrate the bile. Okay, it's a non-essential organ, so you can live without it. Your liver can do the job just as fine, but your gallbladder will store it. So if you ever eat something that's really high in fat, your gallbladder can release a bunch of bile all at once and help you break that fat down a little bit better. The gallbladder is found just underneath the liver, and it actually is kind of greenish in color. Okay, so after meals, the bile will get released from the gallbladder into the small intestine. All right, so let's do a summary of all of this. So remember the organs of your alimentary canal start to your mouth. Food goes down your pharynx to your esophagus, through the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and then out the rectum. Okay, so those are the organs through which the food is going to pass. But other organs are also involved in this process, mainly the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. We also talked about the salivary glands, which are going to moisten your food in your mouth and start adding in some of the different enzymes. But that's the basics for the digestive system and all of the different important enzymes that are involved with digestion.